I hear you fantastic. Greeting from 30 Rock. What's out your window right now?
It is the beautiful planet Earth. Just it's a day pass, which means we can see everything that's rotating by us. And I've been here for 2 days, and so anytime I look out there, I'm just astounded by everything I see.
The Artemis 2 mission has reignited so much wonder once again in space. Does it feel that way up in the International Space Station?
We had the opportunity to have a spacecraft to spacecraft conversation with the Artemis 2 crew on their way back on their translunar flight back from the moon to Earth. And that's super special, right? Humans don't often get the opportunity to have multiple spacecraft talking to each other, sharing the stories of the experiences that they saw, the similarities of the crew's experience from their time on the space station, and the things that they saw on Artemis 2 that, having had humans here on space station for 25 years, that they saw help that program grow and be the success that it is.
Yeah. Humans also don't get to just drop the mic and have it float in front of them perfectly. Artemis 4 is coming up, and either one of you could be chosen. Both of you could be spending a whole lot of time on the moon in the near future. What are your lunar dreams?
I love NASA's ambitions to just do the near impossible, to change our future, and to start a lunar base. I mean, I'm an emergency medicine doctor. I would absolutely like to work in a clinic there, keep people healthy, figure out how to practice medicine. And the cool thing is the space station is kind of a stepping stone to doing that. I'm only on day 2, but each day we kind of learn what it takes to take care of people, the ins and outs of daily life. And I think those skills are just directly applicable to something like a lunar base.
I also saw you talk a little bit about the vastness of that domain and thank the Space Guardians. Was that striking?
You're seeing more people fly to space. You're seeing more missions. Like in the past year and in the coming years, it's going to accelerate so fast. And it's lucky that as a country, we're positioned to be there to support it and to keep it open and accessible to everybody. And so I think one of the most important jobs will be for those guardians and the future ones that are thinking about it. I can't think of anything more exciting. So that's why I would love sharing this with people and try to encourage anyone who wants to do that.
You've only been up there for day 2, but like, what kind of shenanigans happen behind the scenes?
So far, they're drawing a lot of joy out of watching me crash into things. It's kind of like being a toddler, and you're learning to get around a little bit. Sometimes you go too fast and you hit some valuable cameras or things like that. They try to keep it safe, but there is a learning curve to operating in microgravity. In fact, we discussed whether or not we should try to do a backflip here, but Jack was a little bit worried that I hadn't hit Simone Biles level dexterity, but maybe the next interview.
Wait, hold on. Now, next interview, you got the microphone doing backflips. I believe in you. You made it all the way up there. I think it's possible. Let's see. That Simone Biles has never done that, and she is the GOAT. That was Olympic level backflipping. First time. You could have crashed. I mean, you got the suits right there next to you. Very valuable stuff. A 10 out of 10. Thank you so much. It's so interesting to talk to you because, I mean, you have a background in medicine. I know a lot of the experiments that you've taken up there are going to be studying the effects of the vascular system and how the human body interacts with space. We've been going up to space for quite some time. How do we not understand all of this?
I think it's just so new, and we haven't sent enough people up. There's been somewhere on the order of 600 or to 700 people who have flown to space. We've learned so much about medicine on Earth over millions, hundreds of millions of people over time have built knowledge. 600's not that much to learn these things. So we're discovering new diseases, and just like guardians out there, I encourage anyone who's interested in space medicine or medicine to think about it, because there's no field like this where you can just learn a completely new disease process. So it's super interesting from that perspective. And just today we did a really cool experiment where we took water and we turned it into IV fluid. I was doing that with the astronaut Jessica Meir here. And so we're just developing new skills out here, these skills that are going to apply to things that we're going to do in the future.
The more that we can figure out here on the space station, the more science and technology development that we do here, the better off we're going to be when we go to the moon and we go to Mars and beyond.
I do want to ask, I know you guys had that scare up on the International Space Station with the leak. There was the evacuation to a Crew Dragon. How do situations like that work?
It wasn't a normal day, certainly, as we went through that, but also it felt very calm. It was very, we went through the steps of the procedure methodically. We had incredible support from the ground and our colleagues up here as well. And we just worked through the problem until we got to a satisfying solution. And by the end of the day, we were back to work doing our normal science. So I would say that everything kind of worked as advertised, and the teams performed pretty well.
I imagine the first night in space, at least for myself, knowing the threat of things like micrometeors or something unexpected. And like, how did your first night of sleep go on the ISS?
It was actually pretty good. When I got up here, it was in the evening. Closing in, I saw a space station, and we spent so many years studying it, and to see it glinting in the sunlight, reflecting back at us. It was just so beautifully complex and amazing. I think I was more marveling at what a monument to what we were able to achieve together, more so than thinking about some of the potential problems that could happen. I think we put a lot of trust in each other to just get this incredibly difficult job done. And so that helps me sleep well at night, plus being a little bit tired from a pretty long day.
At NASA, it's such an interesting time. I mean, you've got the old school, the fact that you went up on a Soyuz rocket. You've got the training that you're doing on Crew Dragons, and then possibly beyond with Starship, with possibly a lunar lander from Blue Origin. Is it difficult to have one foot in the old legacy technology that is tried and true, and then another foot in engineering that is happening in real time?
When we talk about the different technologies, we're really talking about the people that have put all this technology together and engineering solutions as well. And the time that we spent at Hawthorne working with SpaceX, training on Crew Dragon, those people are so excited and so motivated, and they love what they do. And that type of stuff is infectious and exciting to be part of.
There are very few things on planet Earth that bring us all together. Space is one of them. Seems like the World Cup right now is the other. Are those worlds colliding up there on the International Space Station?
Absolutely. We're watching both of them, and I'm following them pretty intently. And Jack's been working on his skills, and he's looking for a bid in maybe 4 years from now if someone sees his highlight reel.
Fellas, thank you so very much. Houston, thank you. This has been, a bucket list thing for me. I can't tell you how much it's meant to us and the entire team. Godspeed up there. We love looking up, knowing that you guys are circling above every single moment of every single day.
Thanks for those kind words. We're really proud to represent humanity up here as we take our next step to the moon and beyond.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.